As well as youth participation, family and friends participation is another key component of the model. It's important that we see them involved in the care of their loved ones. Rachel, how do you support family and friends to be involved in the care of their loved ones?
Well, at our centre we were lucky enough to have our clinical lead actually champion the single session family consultation work, and she single-handedly convinced me that it would be useful to work with young people in the context of their family. I was not convinced initially, so it's taken a little bit of time and a lot of readjusting for me mentally to see it working. But once I've seen the benefits of it, Sophia, I just haven't really looked back. So I guess the main benefit I see is that you shortcut, you fast track their wellness, because everyone around them that cares about them is actually on the same page. So there's accountability there. There's a lot more openness and transparency in the family home. You're not working with that young person in isolation with their problem or issue, but you're actually having people carry it around them for them as well. So I guess you're minimising risk, and I guess young people just feel a lot more supported and valued when everyone's on the same page. So I can speak for days on the benefits. So it still has to be directed by the young person. You still absolutely make sure that it's something that they want and feel comfortable with. So often I say to a young person, say if they're having an issue with their mum and there's a lot of tension there, I would address that by saying, we're often talking about this issue that you have with your mum, and that's really good, and we're making some headway, but we're not ever really going to fully break through or change this problem for you until we actually bring her into this room and we have an open conversation about this. And quite often the young person will then be motivated because they want that change, they want to see traction, they want things to be different, and that will often allow family and friends or caregivers to be included.
So creating that sort of open and transparent environment in your consultation, does that help the family member, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there needs to be a lot of scaffolding around bringing family into the room though. I think quite often there's a lot of fear and trepidation around potentially being blamed for the young person's issue, or that myself as a clinician will see how tense or fractioned the family is, and that they'll be exposed. So you often have to really create an environment where people feel comfortable, and there's just very limited judgment around the family and the dynamics that is within their culture.
And Janet?
I think sometimes just on that, when you're working with younger people, sort of 12 to 14 age group, the parent is just they come along into the room more frequently, or more likely to just be there anyway, and so that can be a challenge for the young person having their parent there. You see a whole range of things. Sometimes the young person's a bit kind of confused as to why they're there, or really angry about being there because they feel like they've been dragged along. So that can be quite challenging to work with those two really different sort of emotional experiences right there in the room with you.
Rachel, at your centre you run the single session family consultation, which is quite a structured approach to involving family and friends in the care of a young person. Janet and Dana, how would you maybe involve those supporters in your centres?
We don't have, I guess, a structured model. My role involves a bit of family work as well, so sometimes I will get involved and do some shared care with our private providers. So if they're seeing a young person, it might be that I might see a parent separately for a few sessions. We also work quite closely with other family services as well. So we have someone from Mind that comes in once a week that does some family peer support. We also often run sessions in the evening, so group sessions for families and friends in conjunction with other family services such as Drummond Street. More recently we've started running, I guess, a family and friends introduction night, because we know when young people are initially referred, they're overwhelmed with a lot of information, and I think families, friends, parents, carers, they really struggle to hold it all in mind when there's so much going on. So yeah, often we'll sort of have these nights a little bit later on to try and introduce a bit more of what we do at the centre, some basic communication, and also how to get involved as well. Some of the feedback we've had is that parents or carers struggle to know when to get involved in sessions, and they don't want to take over the session either. So yeah, we encourage, for example, when I go out to meet a young person, I might ask, oh, who are you here with today? Yeah, so we do a bit of that. You might have more of an experience of that in your private role.
Yeah, we don't have a formalised or a structured family and friends program either in our centre. So I try and just incorporate family as much as possible in a fairly informal way. And like Dana said, I'll usually go out and greet the young person, and unless I think that that the young person is really opposed to having any involvement, I'll try and encourage them. And obviously you can't say much in the waiting room, so I'll get them to come in. And always in the first session when I'm seeing them, I'll encourage the parent to come in and just touch base, and I'll go through issues with them like confidentiality, and it's good to have them both in the room while we're talking about those sorts of issues. It makes them aware in it that it's kind of it's going to be working in a real sense for them, and yeah, I'll always talk to them, try and introduce into the conversations that we're having, you know, what would your mum or your dad sort of be thinking about this if we were to maybe try and focus on this kind of aspect of your behaviour, or those kinds of things. So try and involve them in conversation and then touching base as well. So it's a pretty informal kind of approach.
What are some of the positives that have come from involving family and friends in the care of the young person?
I think it's really understated. So, you know, in terms of when we involve young people, we're only a small part of their week. And I guess we can do all the work in the world to help them develop insight, teach them all the strategies they need. But if they go home and the environment there is not supportive of change, then it can be really hard to see things move forward. Like you said about sort of fast-tracking change, involving family and friends, it can help create a more sort of supportive environment for them. I know a lot of the young people I see respond really well to validation and feeling understood, and when you can bring their family and friends into the sessions and help them to develop an understanding, sometimes even just that small interaction can help shift the dynamics. I guess in my work I tend to work very relationally, so how someone interacts, I guess a lot of the issues I see tend to be around feeling misunderstood, or everyday interactions with family that might be stressful and just add that extra difficulty for them on top of everything else they're dealing with. So involving them early can really help change things, I think.
What are some of the challenges that you experience initiating that engagement with family and friends?
Well, what I find is that a lot of parents are not particularly enthusiastic about getting involved in the care of their young person in terms of them coming to Headspace. So we get a lot of the parents wanting to do the drop and shop thing. So they'll drop their young person and they kind of get a real shock if there's any sort of suggestion that they might want to stay or that they might want to get involved in some way. A lot of them have the approach of it's their problem, there's nothing wrong with me, like they're the one with all the problem, and you know, can you fix them please? So that can be a real challenge. Some families will have their own issues. There can be things like domestic violence happening that can obviously be a real barrier. Parents have got their own struggles with unemployment, issues around alcohol and drug use, and if they're struggling so much within their own environment, it's really hard for them to be able to extend themselves to getting involved in the care of their young person. So time can be a real issue as well. Yeah. Sometimes parents will have issues of being able to trust the psychologist or being able to trust the mental health service. They may have had their own experiences that may not have been all that positive, so that can be an issue. And they can be very suspicious about what's going on for their young person and what's being said about them. And so to try and involve them in the whole process, sometimes they just have a real negative point of view about the whole thing, so they really don't want to get involved at all. So that's a challenge.
And Chatswood is quite a diverse suburb, so
Yes.
Do you experience any challenges in terms of the cultural and linguistic needs?
Yeah, definitely. There's a very high Asian population in the Chatswood area, and a lot of our young people, in particular their parents, don't speak very good English. And there's a real cultural thing there as well. So definitely some cultural barriers. Obviously not all of them, but it is a real challenge for a lot of families. Yeah, a lot of the young people we see will say that there's no way the parents would get involved because they don't agree with mental illness. So that's definitely a challenge for us in working with a lot of the young people that we see. Yeah, some of them are quite happy for their kids to come along, but once again, they either don't speak English well or don't have any concept of what it would be like to see a mental health professional, and they don't want to be actively involved.
So what are some of the challenges that you've faced when the family and friends are actually engaged in the support of the young person?
Yeah, so once you've crossed that hurdle when they're actually in the room with you, and you've got this family and potentially a distressed young person, I guess the main thing around the challenge of that is facilitating that conversation so it's helpful, it's strength-based, it's actually useful for the young person and the family, and that you're very sensitive to blame and criticism both ways, and that's something that you pick up on pretty early. I guess before that you want to actually scaffold that session with some expectations around how that's going to flow, and so that the young person and the family or caregiver or friend is feeling safe. And I think for me, one of the main challenges as the actual clinician is carrying the emotion that comes from each person. So if you're just working with just the individual, potentially it's a distressing scenario, or they're speaking about something that's traumatic for them, and that's something you're carrying. But when you bring in maybe four people into that room, you've instantly got a lot of stories and journeys that you have to sit with. So I think that's a big challenge. And then beyond that, you've just got the family dynamic that you have to contend with. So there might be a lot of tension. There might be, a family member who's quite argumentative or critical of the young person. And you just have to work out ways to call time out or set safe perimeters for that session.